Alrighty, welcome back everybody to the 11th week of our project development course, a part of a Tech Bytes program where we're working towards a new project every single week. Recently, we just finished up our tic-tac-toe project using the GUI, as I like to say, making a graphical version of tic-tac-toe. And for our first project, we had created Mastermind. And now, to kick off the month of April tomorrow and this whole month of April, we're going to be making potentially one of our last projects in the language of Python. So as always, thank you guys for coming in on today. And without any further ado, let's get going. You guys already know who we are, guys. My name is Grant Sneak. I'm a senior at Conan High School, and today's quote war entails my quote being, "Before code is reusable, it should be usable." Now, Ralph Johnson, he's an American singer, but the quote is pretty accurate. Before you make something that you want to reuse over and over again, you got to make sure that it works the first time. Because if it doesn't work the first time, there's no point in reusing broken code in a different piece of project. So what's the main message? Make sure that you know what you're doing the first time and make it good.
All right, my name is Labdi, and here's my quote of the day. It says, "To be or not to be." It's a famous. I think it's from Hamlet, from Shakespeare. And yeah, it's cool. It's punny because to be or not to be is like a famous quote. But in this case, we wrote it in code syntax, like to be as like 2 times a variable or something, and then the or operator, and then the exclamation point, which means not, and to be again.
That's pretty. We gotta get that on a T-shirt. That's pretty unique. Replace the contact is in the back with that. I think that's better. That's very nice. Oh, we got people already going. Oh, today's a webinar. I think we. Oh, okay. Never mind. Yes, you can add a poll, but. All right, that's this week's Code War. Now let's get to today's project, which you guys have been excited to see what we're making, and some new concepts of which we will be learning. And that before we get there, real quick,
I also added like a loading screen on Among Us.
All right, cool.
It has like a really cool loading screen with like a baby, like one of those baby astronaut things, like just walking across the screen.
All right. Cool. At this point, I'm pretty sure everybody here is already signed up. We have so many people in the Google Classroom today, so we should be good with that. But now, let's get to the project, which we'll be focusing on for the next month, that being a skilled quiz game. Now, with this quiz game, the idea is pretty simple. We'll go over it, but basically, it's any quiz game you've played, right? You've played maybe Kahoot, you played online games. Your goal is to get the most amount of questions right, and we're going to be coding the questions, the answers, but also today's focus is going to be learning about how we can make this quiz game in an advanced way. So more about that to come.
Yep. So just like Ryan said, we'll be creating a quiz game, meaning multiple questions with either multiple choice or a single answer, which you'll get points every time you get correct, and then lose points every time you do not get it correct. But this time, some of you may have created this game because it seems pretty simple. But this time when we are coding this quiz game, we'll be using classes and objects. Now, this is something that people like your parents, if they are in IT, will be using as developers in like huge companies when coding that code. And even like high school teachers teach classes and objects in like sophomore or junior year. So it's a pretty advanced concept, but we believe that you guys are capable enough with already so many months of coding in the language of Python, so we decided to incorporate this concept into our game.
Wait, don't you just you don't receive any points if you get it wrong, but you don't lose it because that might be unfair?
That's up to us. We can make it so that you lose points if you get it wrong. You gain certain points. So that's something which we can change, and definitely whatever you guys like.
Yep.
Alrighty, so now for today's
goal. It's kind of like your estimathon, but it's actual like questions.
Yeah.
So it's gonna be like the same like base kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, we in the website that I coded, you could also do like a quiz game. So basically, it's coding a part of that website that you guys saw. So yeah, nice connection.
Are we gonna do it like completely Python based, or can we do it like? Is there a way to integrate like the Python that you do into like the HTML?
Now, there are ways to use Python in like creating a website, but that's usually used in like backend. Python is used in backend coding, so working with like data, and then that stuff is then sent to HTML, JS, and CSS. But this time we're just going to be working with Python,
Okay.
just to learn like the concept that we're going to teach, and then maybe next, starting with the month of May or June, we'll be switching our languages.
Yeah, we could definitely maybe even have an Hack Central about Flask, maybe with Python. So that's a good idea.
Yeah.
Alrighty, so guys, let's get to today's goal. That being that today you probably can notice it doesn't say anything about us actually coding, and that's right. We're not going to actually start programming the project because today we're going to get started off by learning about this new concept Lobby just mentioned about classes and objects, seeing how it's applied, comparing it to real-world examples, and doing a quick little example on Replit of how we can create this thing called a class and object. So without any further ado, let's get to it.
All right. Before we do get to it, here's just a quick plan that we have set for this little project. So of course, week one, that'll be this week, we'll be learning new concepts. The major concept would be classes and objects. Week two, apply those concepts and start coding the game. That includes, the documentation that we usually start with, like describing which steps we're going to take and coding the first few steps. Week three, doing coding, finishing those middle to last steps, and then week four, finally finishing the steps and then debugging. Actually, that's for all 4 weeks. If you're coding, you're definitely debugging all the time. So, yep.
Alrighty, so now let's get towards talking about what this whole thing about a class and an object is.
Yeah.
Now, before we get started, does anybody in the crowd, anybody here, ever heard of what a class or an object? Anybody have any ideas, thoughts they want to throw out before we get started talking about what it actually is?
My computer is an object, and this is class.
Well, Chase, in a dictionary.com definition, that is 100% correct. But how about a more, let's go a Tech Bytes definition? Anybody have an idea?
Techbytes.com.
Well, okay, you guys got some funny ideas, but now let's get towards talking about what actually is this thing called a class and an object.
Yep. Okay, so ready, set, go. Okay, classes. Think about classes as not like classroom, teacher, student, that setting, but classes, forget that definition. Think of classes as templates. Templates. Basically, for example, in geometry class, when you use a template to draw a triangle or a circle, think of that as a class. And then objects are basically like the little children of those of that template, like the circles that you drew, the triangles that you drew using that template. Basically, classes help you create multiple different objects. Now, Ryan, go to the next page. I think that's a very great example.
Techbytes.com/dictionary. Look it up.
Exactly. So like Lobby was talking about right here, if I go back one slide, the class is the object, aka think of a class being like the blueprint, and the object is the actual product. So now if we take a look at a real world example right here, we have a class on the left, which is a blueprint of a car. Now, a blueprint isn't an actual product. It's not something tangible which I can hold in my hand or touch, right? However, an object, we got 3 car brands. We got a Mercedes, we got a BMW, and we got an Audi, right? Those are actual cars which we can drive. So that's the main difference. What we're going to be learning about today is how a class is just this idea. We have variables inside of a class. We have functions inside of a class. However, they aren't actually anything until we declare and instantiate the fancy word to say declare them with an object. So like in this example, we have a class of a car. In a car, there's multiple things, right? There's how much horsepower does it have? How big of an engine? How many wheels? How many doors does it have, right? All that type of thing. And then the actual object is when we pass in certain parameters. Do we want a car with a sports car? So we want 2 doors and 4 wheels. Do we want a family, like a sedan type of car? We want 4 doors. It's good on fuel, stuff like that, right? So the object is the actual product which we have when we're actually using the template. and the class is the blueprint. It's the behind the scenes stuff which has been created but not actually declared. Does that kind of make sense? Anybody have any questions?
So basically, a class is basically the category, and the objects are the things are what's in the category.
Exactly. Yeah. You have class.
Class is like the general, like you have like a book, like class is like the outside, and then as you go more deeper in details, it's like objects like you put inside the class.
Exactly. Like I think Avanisha mentioned a book. Say we have a class about a book, right? Let's do a quick little example right here. Say we have a book class, right? Class of a book. Now, what are some components when we think of a book? What stuff which differs in a book?
Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, like a class of a book is,
Chapters.
yeah,
Yeah. So like, what makes up a book though? Like, it's a physical book.
I did
What
the objects.
like
Cover.
the number of pages, right? We have the number of pages in a book. We have the cover. We have the author, and then
Publisher.
yep, the publisher. So these are all aspects of a book. Now, notice that this is very general, like you guys were mentioning, right? This is just a class. However, for us to actually create this book and for us to actually be able to hold it and use it, right? We have to do something called declaring an object. And we'll do a little example afterwards on Replit to see how we actually do this, but this is like pseudocode, meaning we're just pretending we're writing code out here. When we're declaring the object, we're going to say our book and call whatever book we wanted to say. We can say Tech Bytes book. So Tech Bytes book is equal to a new book. And then inside of here, we pass variables. Now, can anybody remind me, what are these variables inside of parentheses called?
Parameter.
Yep, Avanish. So in this case, we would pass parameters as to how many pages are there. We'll say it's a 400-page novel. What's the cover looking like? Is it glossy? Is it matte? We'll say it's a glossy cover. Who's the author? We'll say Chase is the author. And then who's the publisher? We'll put Avanish as the publisher. So these are the parameters which we're passing through. Now, once this line of code has been written, then do we actually have the physical object it's been declared. Now we can then use this object, we'll see in the coming weeks, to manipulate our data, change out variables, stuff of that sort. So that's the main idea of a class with that example. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
If anybody does have a question, you guys can always feel free to privately message me or Labdi, or you can just speak up too. The book is called How to Win a Quote War. Yeah, Chase, that will have to be the next book.
All right. So I think we are on that stage where we think we understand it, we kind of understand it, but it's kind of foggy in our mind. So I think an example in Replit will help us. And give me a second. I will start sharing my screen. All right. Can you all see my screen?
Yep.
We can.
All right. And I'm gonna share this with y'all.
I will be the first one in. Yes.
Let's see. Okay. Who's Talus?
That's
We got
me.
2 people. Nice. You were the first one in. Okay, as people are coming in,
I was
just click on
second.
the.
I was
Okay,
second.
nice. Just click on the link, and you should be in the Replit. Just watch me code, and yeah. Okay, so we talked about classes as like templates, and then objects as things you create using those templates, like the Mercedes, Audi, and what was the other one? BMW. But what about classes in Python? So I'm gonna start writing stuff down and then explaining it to you. Feel free to shout out if you guys have any questions. Don't feel like stupid about them. This is a new concept for you guys, so here we go. So initiating or declaring, or yeah, a class means a similar thing to what we did when declaring a function. We have to define what that class is. So I'm going to do class person. I'm going to make a person class for now. And inside that, let's see. Inside that, there's this initializer function that every class has. And that's going to be def init. And just going to enter self. And there we go. So this is an initializer class that whenever, or initializer function that whenever we call this class, this function will run automatically. Now inside this function, there's this parameter called self. We don't need to understand specifically what that is. This is just the syntax of a basic class in Python. Just leave it at that. And then once we do start working with classes, we will automatically understand what role this plays. So other than this parameter, I'm going to add in two other parameters. So since this is a person class, two things that a person has is a first name and a last name. So let's start with those two. So first, comma, last. So these are the parameters that I'm going to pass into this class. And once I do that, I'm going to say self.firstName is equal to first. Now, this seems a little bit repetitive because what I'm doing is I set the first name property or characteristic of this, of an object that I will eventually make to the variable that I passed in. And I'm going to do the same thing with last name. So self.lastName is equal to last. And that is all we'll do with the class. Now for actually using that class. So whenever you use a class, it's called creating an object, mostly. So yeah.
When you said that's all for the class, I thought you said that's all we're doing for today.
Oh no, I'm not leaving you guys. Don't worry. Okay, so yeah, creating the object now. What I'm going to do is, let's say I take myself. I'm going to create a lobdy, okay? I'm going to say lobdy. Lobdy is equal to, now this is a variable or an object this time since we're going to use this person class. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to call that person class. And inside that, I'm going to pass two parameters, first and last. So what is my first name? Anyone know?
It's not lobby.
Okay, let's just try that then. And then I'm going to put in my last name, Jane. So there we go. Oh, look who forgot to capitalize her name. Okay, so here we go. I set a variable called lobdy to this object, person, and then inside that object, I passed in two variables, lobdy and Jane. Now what this code will do is I call this class. So what it's going to do is it's going to go back to this class over here, this class over here, and it's going to initialize or create an object called lobdy. And that object will have two properties so far, a first name and a last name. And that first name I set to this first, which I passed in a variable, a string called lobdy. And then the last, this last variable or parameter is Jane. So these are my two properties. And I'm going to show you how I call those properties and how using an object may become useful one day. Okay, so if I say print, suppose, okay, imagine I want to make a person, but I don't want to remember their first and last name, so I have to put them in every time. So I just created an object and set those properties inside that object. Now all I have to handle is lobdy and lobdy alone, like a person, not two names or like 10 different properties, 10 different characteristics. All of those are inside that person. So now whenever I call lobdy, let's just print something. So if I say print lobdy dot, do you guys see these two properties, first name and last name? This is what I created right over here. So if I, let's say, call this first name, print lobd.firstname, and I run, then it's going to print lobd. Now let's say I add in another parameter over here, height, and let's say I do self.height is equal to height. And lastly, I'll just add in a number. I'll do my actual height, guys, 987 inches. So this time, instead of, let's say, actually, let's just print both things. So I say print lobd dot. You'll see three things now: first name, height, and last name. So that's the magic of classes and objects. Here, I created a template from which I created an object myself, lobd. Now, if I do print height, you'll get my real height. Now, just to finish off like the whole explanation, let's create another object. Who do we want to create? Anyone from here? Okay, let's create Chase. Chase is equal to person, because Chase is a person. And then Chase's first name. Chase, what's your last name? I'll just do the god.
Chase. Oh yes. No, Chase the Joe Destroyer.
Oh, okay.
I like that one better. Good idea, Aish.
Yeah. Destroyer. All right. Nice last name there, Chase. And then your height, let's do 1,000 inches. Okay. So these are three properties that I sent in through parameters. And now I have created Chase, a person.
Chase, how are you so much taller than lobd?
Okay. Hey, he's not that tall, only 13 inches, okay? A foot. Okay, so I created Chase. Now I don't have to handle these three different characteristics of Chase whenever I want to call him over. All I have to do is call Chase, yo Chase, come over, and then just ask him for either height or first name. And let's actually try that out. So print, what do we want to print? Chase dot last name, because that's the best. So if we do that, again, Chase, the Joe Destroyer, that's his last name, and that's what we printed out. Now, this was, 12 lines of code, but that was very intricate, complex on one hand, but on the other hand, it's just we created a template, and then we used that template of a person to create two people, which are our objects, and then we call different properties of those two people. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. How's that? Okay, so any questions?
So basically, so this is what we'll be using in the quiz, right?
Yep.
That'll be interesting.
Let's
Yeah,
talk.
so just to give a little foreshadowing, here we created a class of a person. In the quiz game, what are we basically going to handle a lot of? We're not going to handle 100 people or 10 people or 20 people. We're going to have a lot of questions, right? Different types of questions, but
So you're gonna
all
do
of
like
them,
class of questions?
yeah, exactly. So because
Try
all of them
something.
have similar properties, like they'll have a question, they'll have an answer, and maybe they'll have a point. So how many points per question? So we're gonna have those properties defined over here, and we're just gonna create some questions, maybe append them to an array. So create a list of questions, and then do things with them.
Well, hey, after this class is done, if you're ever stuck with your computer without no power, just bring up these and have some fun with all the games you make through this.
Yep, definitely. Yeah, so anyone have a question regarding classes and objects?
All right, then let's see how we're gonna. Lobby has talked about how we're gonna apply it, and just to wrap this whole new concept of classes and objects.
You want me to stop sharing?
Yeah.
Oh.
Let's just do a quick recap on why this is the best way for us to move forward. to use class and objects. A lot of you just covered this as well. The main idea, guys, with using classes and objects is that we're able to save a bunch of time. Like Abdi was saying, if we had, in this class right now, we have a total of about 8 people, right? We each have a first name and a last name, and some of us probably even have a middle name. So if we think about that, right, that's like, say 4 people have middle names, that's 20 total names. Now, in order to house all that, that's 20 separate variables if we did not use objects and classes. However, with this idea of having a blueprint of a class now, all we need is 8 variables instead of 20, which is much more manageable. Now, if you think about this in the real world, right, we have social media accounts. It would be Facebook has over 1 billion users, right? 1 in 5 people in the world have Facebook, right? Now, if Facebook kept track of 1 billion people times their first name, their last name, their date of birth, their email, we're probably talking about trillion pieces of data, right? We're going mega, big pieces of data. However, if you use a class and object, we're making sure that we're cutting down on the number of pieces of data which we have to keep track of. And ultimately, that's going to be our goal. Moving forward with the quiz project next week, like Avanish, you were talking about as well, we're going to use the class as a blueprint for our questions in a way which makes it much more easier on our end to keep track of it. So keep your guys' eyes out for that. But like we said, that was just this week's objective of getting to know what classes and objects are, getting eased back into this week's project development. As always, guys, be sure to have a great upcoming weekend. Remember, this Friday, we have our video gaming hour where Chase, the Joe Destroyer, will be going up against actually Joe. So we'll see you guys there. Other than that, guys, nothing much for you. Stick around if you guys have any questions. We'll catch you guys this Friday. See you guys.
Bye. Thank you.